Mark Skaar on the Skaar Kaard on 103.7 The Fox. I'm proud to welcome in Dokken guitarist Jon Levin. How are you, sir?
Doing well. Thanks so much for having me on. How you doing?
I'm doing well, thank you. And Heaven Comes Down. It's been a long time coming. Congratulations on the new release. The last record was 11 years ago. You've done a ton of touring, and now the new one is out.
Yeah, it's been a minute. This one actually was done, we finished it a year ago already, so it's been a minute till it got released, which is interesting because you get to have more time and reflect back in the music when you hear it after not having heard it for so long, you know.
Silver Lining Records, the new record, Heaven Comes Down, by my count, the 12th studio album, and this has the classic sound. You've been in the band 20 years, so I would imagine, Jon, you have a pretty good handle on how things should sound.
Well, you know, I was a Dokken fan when I was a kid. And I think that's where it stemmed from, you know. I still, for some reason, I still feel like I'm able to view it from a third-party perspective as the fan, you know. And I think that's maybe what helps me in terms of when I'm presenting things and ideas to Don, keeping them in what I feel like is on target for what I would want to hear from a Dokken record, you know.
Let's get into some of the songs. I think Fugitive was the first thing we heard from this record, yeah?
Yeah.
Tell me about how that one, the germ of the idea for that one came from.
The riff idea, the intro riff I had in my mind on an airplane, and I had no way to record it. You know, it's always one of these things that you have to balance laziness in your mind with actually doing something. So I managed to keep it in my head. I got off the plane, took my handheld out and sang it into the handheld. And then eventually I demoed the music of that and sent it to Don. You know, in the past, we would always collaborate together, Don and I, in terms of, like, in the same room. But with COVID on this one, everything went out the window. Like, you know, there was the lockdown. Nobody could even get together. Mm-hmm. So we had to really work independently. And just for me, my biggest impediment in the past in terms of using my Pro Tools studio, because I've had a Pro Tools studio for many years, but I was never able to get through conquering how to do drums. That was always, like, my problem. So I would always need to tell Don, you got to get me an engineer. And I'd have an engineer, sit with me or whatever, or we had to do it like that. So this really forced me, the COVID thing, to learn how to get the drums on. And once I did that, and I was able to do that, it came easily to me. Once I finally got it, I had all this music saved up on my handheld from all these years of putting on riffs. When I come up with a riff, I would record it, and if I think it was something that could possibly work for the Dokken stuff, I labeled it, like, for Dokken. So I just started plowing through those. I'm like, and there was nothing else to do because it was COVID, so I started getting up early in the morning, whereas I used to, Don and I would always work, we were night owls, we would always work late, 2, 3 in the morning. You know, we really even couldn't get our brains going until after dinner. It was like, that's how it always was. But I watched this video once of Michael Schenker talking, and he was saying how, for him, he has to write really early in the morning. So I was like, let me try that. So I started writing in the morning, and for some reason, like, for me, it really worked well. Like, I was fresher, and even if I didn't have any new idea, I would say, okay, well, I'm going to take one of these riffs from the handheld and record a track of that. So I was always working, and sending Don things, and then Don was working on his end. He did Santa Fe all by himself, Don. Okay. With Bill. He did that. Don wrote that and recorded that on his end. And Like a Rose was a track that Don had prior to this. He had lyrics, melodies, and a track, and that I just rewrote the guitar stuff on. The rest of them stemmed from music that I recorded here and either sent to Don or he came out here. Once, the vaccine came, then he was able to come out here. And we got a vocal mic set up. And the thing that's really amazing about how Don writes, let me give you, for example, like, we put the vocal mic up, I play him the track, and if his switch is on, he comes up with lyrics and melodies off the top of his head. Like, it isn't like, let me think about this. It really, a lot of times, like, the first thing he just blasts out, I have to be ready to record that, because if you don't, it's gone forever. Like 5 minutes later, or even sometimes on the next pass, if I didn't have it in record or recording it onto my handheld to save it, he won't do it again the same way. But he blasted out, and like as soon as he did that with Fugitive, I played him the track. He started singing "I'm a Fugitive for Life." As soon as I heard that from me, I was like, "Wow, that's freaking awesome." I don't know if he perceived it as being that good. I don't know if he recognized it as anything. I knew I did though when he sang that. I'm like, "Oh yeah, that's killer."
That's a keeper.
Yeah. And that's how I think a lot of his. I'm pretty sure some of those vocal lines that are on the record were the original things he sang here in my place.
If it ain't broke, don't fix it.
Well, that was a very smart motto we seem to live by for this album because, like, let me give you for example. In the past, we would demo everything. Like, okay, now all the demos are done. Let's start over and make an album. So I would then re-record all my rhythm guitars. And I was always feeling like that was sterilizing what I did. Just how I like to play is, the first thing I come up with and the first time I play it usually is the best way, even if it's some slop in there. And Don said to me, you know what, on this one, John, I like the rhythms. Let's leave them. Let's leave all the demo rhythms. I'm like, you know what? I think that's a great idea. So all of the rhythms on the record are the demos.
Interesting. Well, if it works, why not?
Yeah, it worked because it kept me from sterilizing it by redoing it,
Sure,
sometimes
overthinking.
Have lightning in a bottle, leave it. Don't try and recapture it.
Yeah, overthinking sometimes just kills it.
Yeah, I agree, yeah. So that's how we did it on this one.
Talking to Jon Levin, guitarist from Dokken. Gypsy's another one, the second track. I think it was the second single. I think it's one of my favorite tracks on the record. Just super, super hook-laden and catchy.
Yeah, I love the lyric and melody that Don came up with for that. That's like, to me, that's just so clever. You have so many other bands, every song's about a girl or a breakup, and, there's Don coming up with, a song about a gypsy experience. It's just, I think that's just super clever. And different.
Agreed. And then the last thing that you released before the record came out was Over the Mountain, and no, it's not an Ozzy song.
Yeah. Over the Mountain was a couple of songs that I wasn't going to play. I had the tracks, but I wasn't even going to play them for Don. I thought, if these are outside, I don't think he's going to like them. So he was at my here one day, and I said, hey, yeah, I got these two songs. Let me just play them for you, and you could say that you don't like them, or we can move on, because I don't think they're going to work for us. But I'll just play them for you anyway, just because I finished them musically, that is,
Sure.
So I played them Over the Mountain and Saving Grace. But they didn't have any lyrics or melodies, but those were the tracks. And when he heard Over the Mountain, he said, I like it. He said, it reminds me of old Gary Moore.
Oh, sure.
He said. And he wrote it in a way that it actually did come out to be something that fits within the Dokken camp at the end. And same with Saving Grace. Initially, I didn't personally hear either of those as necessarily working for what we were doing, but he came up with an angle, Don, that made him fit.
For some reason, I Remember is one of my favorite songs on this record. Again, that chorus is just, it sinks its teeth in and it grabs you.
You know what? I'm glad you like that one. That one hasn't really been discussed much in the context of what my interviews have been in the last couple of weeks, so. Yeah, it's a good one.
Oh, really? Well, then, by all means, take the floor is yours.
That's just another one that, at some point we had a couple of ballads going, and we weren't sure what we were going to do. I mean, you don't ever know at the end game what the label's going to want to put on an album or how something's going to be packaged, but there was actually 4 more songs written for this album that never got on. I think they maybe end up being released as bonus, but there's a couple of ballads in there. So at the end of the day, when we had like these mass, like 14 songs, right, there was 3 or 4 ballads in there. And, I can understand from the packaging perspective, the label's like, we don't want to put on 4 ballads on the record. Don and I sort of wanted everything on. Like, just put all 14 on, But I understand, as someone who owned a label, you have to respect it, and they have a smart business plan, and they're going to release those songs as bonus tracks or whatever, but they wanted to do it how they wanted to do it. So we had to basically choose 2 from the ballads we had, and the 2 that made it on were I Remember and Never Give Up. And I personally think they're both great songs, especially like Never Give Up. I think that's one of Don's best vocal performances, maybe ever. I mean, it's just a wonderful vocal performance for me.
I think Don sounds pretty good on this record. We know what the elephant in the room is. Everybody talks about it, but and you can do certain things vocally in studio that you certainly can't do live, but it sounds good.
Yeah, thank you. You know what? My response, because, I know what the elephant probably is you're thinking, but what I always say, because Don and I have talked about that, too, that, I'm like, Don, he was 68 years old, I think, when we started recording this or something like that. You're 68 years old. I mean, do you really think you're going to, number one, no, how can anyone expect you to think like you did when you were 20? And even if you could, screaming isn't going to make a better emotional conveyance. Let me give you like an analogy how I think about this. Just because someone has a ton of tools in their toolbox, like say it's a box of crayons, right? You have 50 colors. Someone else might be able to paint a better painting just using a pencil. it's not so much how many tools you have. It's sort of like saying, hey, I could play a guitar really fast. Am I better just because I play fast all the time? That music is conveyance of a feeling and an emotion, right?
Exactly.
That's what it is. And I think on this album, Don did a wonderful job with what he did.
Well, I think you have to play to your strengths, and at the age of 70 now, definitely his mid-range is still strong, and his vibrato is still, he's got a command of it, and it really sells itself to the songs.
Agreed. And he doesn't sound like anyone else. There's not that many singers that really sound just like them. There's a whole bunch of singers that sound generic, and you don't sort of know what they are. But Don's voice is unmistakable. It's an unmistakable fingerprint.
Talking with Jon Levin from Dokken. I'm not as familiar with the rhythm section. Maybe our listeners aren't either. I'd like you to talk for a moment about Chris McCarville and B.J. Zampa, if you wouldn't mind.
Sure. First of all, they're a total powerhouse. I mean, for anyone who's seen us, know that those two are just like a freight train. Chris played with us on the Poison tour. I think it was 2008. I met Chris through a mutual friend of ours, and that was many years ago. And then over time, he lives on the East Coast. So at the time, I think Sean McNabb was local here, and in terms of having someone play in the band on a permanent basis, Don's consideration was largely, let's have the band all close by at the time so we can all play. Time goes by, and, now we have BJ and Chris played in House of Lords together. And at one point, we did a show with him. It was in England, and I remember I was in the dressing room and listening to those guys play, and I was sitting with Mick. And Mick and I, like, Mick, listen to this band, man. This freaking rhythm section is like a freaking freight train. And, Mick said to me, John, one day when I leave the band, that's the drummer you get. Right then.
Wow.
I said, really? He said, yeah, he's got the right backbeat. He's got the right feel. And in the Dokken situation, there's been many drummers that we've had in the past that filled in or played for a period of time, but it's a very hard seat to fill because the way Mick played, he would push in certain spots and he'd lay back in certain spots, and if you didn't do that, it didn't feel right. And, BJ's capable of doing that, which is just unbelievable. So, he's one of those drummers that I can play with on autopilot. I don't even have to think about it, which is wonderful. A
good drummer is harder to find than you think.
Oh, yeah. And it sets the feel for the band.
Yeah.
Especially when you're a three-piece. There's only three guys, bass, drums, and guitar. You're only as good as the worst player. And luckily, man, those guys are killers.
John, what's 2024 looking like for Dokken?
Well, for 2024, we need to tour, and we are going to tour as extensively as possible for the Heaven Comes Down record. They're talking about us going to Japan, and it looks like we're going to go to Europe again. We haven't been to Europe since before COVID. We did the Dokken Open Air Festival, I think it was 2018. That was the last time we've been there. Once the COVID thing hit, things all shut down, and there was, as you recall, European travel was far on anyone's list of a possibility at that time. So, but yeah, I'm really excited about going back. We haven't been there in so long, and Don and I both love it there, frankly. We usually end up staying, like, when we do the European tour, Don and I frequently say, hey, man, let's stay an extra week and hang. So in the past, like, we did that. We stayed in Paris for like a week or 10 days together. And we usually like to do that, so we love it there.
How hard is it going to be to get to work the new songs into the set when you have so much that you kind of have to play?
Yeah, that's always a double-edged sword. We're definitely going to start playing. We're going to do Fugitive and Gypsy for now. We're going to start weaving those in. But you're exactly right, because if you put one song in, you have to take something else out. And if you have a fan in the audience that doesn't even know the new record, say, they're going to be like, what are these, and why didn't they play Into the Fire, right? It's sort of like you have to work them in slowly. It's a hard one. We're definitely going to do it. And I can already feel like they tell you that they feel really good in the set, because a couple of weeks ago we shot 4 more videos for this record. So now that means it's like 7 total. And we did 4 videos on stage. And, playing these songs, listening to these songs, it's like, wow, they feel just so right for what we do. Like, they just fit right into the camp. So, yeah, I think it's going to work out.
If people want to find out more about Jon Levin, they want to find out more about Dokken, how can they do that?
Well, Dokken.net always has the tour dates. I have Jon Levin guitars, which I am going to, at some point, start putting up performance clips on how to play some of these, because I've been getting a lot of emails asking, how do you play this riff and how do you play that already? So I think I'm going to probably do some posting there. But, yeah, the tour dates will all be on the Dokken.net, so just watch out for those. They post them as quickly as they're confirmed. So the 2024 dates should start coming in soon, I would hope.
Jon, thank you for your time. Congratulations on Heaven Comes Down, and we'll just move forward with more rock and roll. Thank you.
Thank you so much for having me. Have a great one. Rock on.
That's Jon Levin, guitarist from Dokken, our guest on the Skaar Kaard, the new classic rock that rocks on 103.7 The Fox.